hi everyone who joined tonight in this webinar. I'm going to be talking about financing nature-based solutions in cities. What are the challenges, barriers, and opportunities to finance these projects and investments? Just before I jump in, I am from the Global Green Growth Institute, which is a treaty-based international intergovernmental organization. We are dedicated to support and promote strong, inclusive, and sustainable development in developing and emerging economies. We work on a member state basis. We have operations both in our member and partner states and some other countries. I am currently based in the Hungary office. I'm working on local, so Hungarian, European, and global initiatives and projects. So jumping into the finance question at hand. So what is the challenge in terms of nature-based solutions? It's unsurprising that it's severely underfunded. Only 1/4 of the levels are currently mobilized that are needed to reach the Rio Convention targets by 2050. And out of these annual mobilized amounts, 80% is provided by the private sector governments. Also, to accelerate the problem, according to UNEP estimates, the annual finance flows from public and private sources that have a direct negative impact on nature are estimated at $7 trillion per year. I couldn't even put it on the chart to make a comparison to climate flows that are needed or going into nature-based investments. And this is likely an underestimation. So the problem is quite sizable here. But before falling into depression, I will just talk about how we can close the finance gap and the finance we need for mobilizing and for implementing nature-based solutions. So I categorize the solutions in two folds. So on the one hand, we can target financing solutions. So we need to increase both public nature-based spending and private nature-based spending. And we need to create an enabling environment to mobilize for both public and private finance. From the policy side of point of view, obviously there are several policy issues that can support the successful implementation and scaling of nature-based solutions. But in terms of mobilizing finance, besides creating an enabling environment, we need to reduce the nature negative public subsidies and reduce the nature negative private investments. So as we've seen on the first graph, both public and private flows need to increase to close the finance gap to achieve our targets. Public investment will continue to play a critical role in both in funding and spending on NBS, especially those that provide public goods, social health, urban resilience related co-benefits, and public bodies, municipalities, and national governments need to make strategic use of the public funds to crowd in private investment. From the side of the private sector, we see that there is they have a pivotal role in closing the gap, and cities have a role to stimulate and raise contribution from the private domains by creating an enabling environment and by creating innovative levers and mechanisms that act as catalysts for mobilizing private finance. In terms of barriers, we have numerous to overcome. For public finance, the investment capacities, cities through on-source revenues in tight fiscal and monetary environments are limited. Especially, I can say now that political environment is also limiting the funds that goes to nature-based and climate solutions. Everybody reads the news, so it's no surprise. The coordination gaps and conflicting strategies between different levels of government also pose a sizable barrier. And there are organizational and institutional barriers at municipality levels. For example, municipalities work in silos, they lack the capacity to develop bankable projects, and so on. In terms of private finance mobilization, one of the largest problem is that benefits from nature-based solutions are partly public and therefore not easily monetizable for investors. For example, urban cooling, flood reduction, and quantifying benefits is both complex and context specific. Investors perceive nature-based solutions as high risk due to lack of clear financial returns, and due to policy uncertainty, it's very difficult to mobilize private finance in certain countries' cases. For example, in the absence of regulations and enabling frameworks. The good news is that we can do a lot to enable both public and private funds to be mobilized. Cities need to strengthen their multi-level governance and collaboration with national governments to access national funding, policy support, and align both national, local, and cross-departmental policies and priorities. We need to build institutional capacity in cities so they can have the expertise and tools to develop investment-ready projects, to be able to quantify and promote the benefits of nature-based solutions by valuation of natural capital and monetizing nature where possible. And cities need to rely and can rely on project preparation facilities and technical assistance available to them. Moreover, cities need to enhance their municipal financial stability. They need to strengthen the revenue streams that they already have. And one another step to unlock more finance is to integrate climate priorities and nature-based priorities in financial planning. Also, nature-based solutions needs to be mainstreamed in sector and urban planning. So they need to make more space instead of, for example, prioritizing green infrastructure. The cities need to ensure that nature-based and blue-green infrastructure are prioritized and included in urban planning, master plans, and so on. And cities and national government needs to create an investment-friendly environment through regulatory reforms and introduction of mandates and incentives. This is a point where cities need to collaborate with the national government, as many times they do not even have the mandate to introduce regulations. And lastly, but not least, municipalities need to have a strategic they need to strategically use their public funds to attract co-financing. I will talk about this a bit later. There are many opportunities and financial instruments available to finance climate action and nature-based solutions, but obviously other sectors as well. They both come from public and private domain, as we've discussed. Public finance comes in the form of taxes, fees, charges, climate city funds, land value capture, government grants, and intergovernmental transfers from the point of view of the cities. Cities can also rely on international and supranational organizational funds in the form of grants, loans, guarantees, and funds. And in terms of private financing, finance comes from capital markets and private actors, financial institutions, and through different innovative solutions. Just a small mention, I don't really want to go through on each funding and technical assistance programs available to cities, but there are quite a lot available for European cities. Quite a few are made available by the EU itself and different third-party international organizations. Cities can tap into funding in the forms of grants and loans, but they can also tap into alongside funding or separately technical assistance to help them create bankable projects, assess, create project feasibility studies, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of resources cities can use and apply for. In terms of nature-based solutions, there are some financial instruments that have more potential than others. I have grouped these into three. So group one is three instruments I listed that can provide substantial upfront capital for larger project and infrastructure-like projects. These are thematic and sustainability-linked bonds where proceeds can be invested in nature-positive projects, for example, the climate bond in Paris. Public-private partnerships enable the public and private investments to be aligned to deliver goods and services to the public. For example, public parks can be operated by private entities, and land value capture is also a very potential mechanism. through which municipalities can recover all or part of the positive increment in land value caused by public action. They can recover this increased value through taxes or charges. In our second group, cities can rely on consistent revenue streams, either through payments for ecosystem services, which are widely used in rural areas but have a quite promising urban potential, and carbon, biodiversity, and other type of credits. So these credits can be used, which we are all familiar with, to offset carbon emissions, or they can deliver biodiversity or other nature-related benefits. We will look at one case example from Washington, D.C., where the city has introduced a stormwater retention credit market. And our third group is de-risking to attract private finance. It can be done through blended finance approaches, which means cities can blend public and philanthropic sources to increase private sector investment, attract and increase, and guarantees and insurance is another form of de-risking instruments to reduce perceived or real risk borne by private investors. So in a very simplified ways, there are 4 steps to unlock finance. One is to create an enabling environment. So we need to strengthen institutional capacities and regulatory frameworks in cities. We need to mainstream NBS into infrastructure and urban planning and upgrading. Cities need to have an efficient use of public funds, so they need to increase municipal sources of finance through taxes, charges, and subsidies. And they need to continue tapping into conventional funding streams such as infrastructure funders, MDBs, through grants and loans. Blending is another very promising option not to be missed. So cities need to diversify and bundle financial instruments tailored to each project and investment, and need to tap into innovative ways of using grant funding to attract private finance. So, for example, combine EU grants with equity risk financing to support public-private partnerships. And last but not least, scaling up private funds through quantifying and marketing benefits of nature-based solutions, and to unlock private finance through bonds and credit mechanisms, for example, the strategic use of guarantees and de-risking mechanisms, and to use innovative instruments to channel private finance. And I have 4 case studies. I will just talk about it so you can see how different blending approaches have worked in cities, in mobilizing finance and implementing successful nature-based solutions and other urban resilience projects. The first case study is Budapest. So the city has introduced an environmental protection fund last year, actually. And through these funds, it provides small grants for small-scale projects to civil society organizations, schools, and higher education institutions. Projects have a maximum cost of, wait, how much? I don't know if I put this down, but very small scale projects. The full, you can see it's small scale because the total budget is 70,000 euros. So around, I think 2,000 or 4,000 euros is the maximum amount to be mobilized by organizations. And the city only covers 75% of the total project cost, which is pretty good. And the private investment part comes in the 25%. So far, 29,000 euros have been given out in the form of non-repayable grants to applicants. And the supported projects include programs promoting composting, climate and biodiversity protection actions, environmental education campaigns, animal welfare initiatives, nature trails creation, and pesticide-free tree planting. Another good example I like is the mobilization of European Investment Bank's loan facility to implement adaptation measures in Athens. So basically, EIB, through the Nature Capital Finance Facility, provides 5 million funds to different adaptation projects. The pilot projects typically range from 2 to 15 million. So these are generally larger scale projects with terms up to 10 years and over. And similarly to the case in Budapest, the facility finances 75% of the cost, capped at 50 million euros, and the remaining 25% needs to be covered by either public or private sources. Athens so far has implemented 4 projects through this facility. A very favorite case study of mine is the stormwater credit program in DC. This works very similarly to EETS or any carbon trading mechanism. Basically, the city is requiring development projects to retain 100% of stormwater on their sites and avoid flooding. And developers can generate and sell these stormwater retention credits after they implement these projects, either by installing green infrastructure or by removing impervious surfaces. If all or none of the stormwater can be retained in a new development, developers can either pay a fee in lieu of the cost of implementing these stormwater retention measures, or they can buy stormwater credits that needed to keep their projects under the set limit. So as you can see, this is a really good mechanism that has been introduced by the city, but needs strong policy backing to work and function well. And our last case study is from Italy. I wanted an Italian case study, is coming from Bologna. So the Bologna adaptation to climate change focuses on innovative adaptation measures, and they are relying on life path projects. The key initiative of Bologna is the Green Area Inner City Agreement, and it promotes tree planting through public-private partnerships. Gaia enables businesses to offset their carbon footprint by tree planting and maintenance to enhance urban resilience. The city's role is to provide clear guidelines and oversight and ensure transparency and replicability by other municipalities. Gaia is funded through a greenhouse gas emission compensation scheme, where businesses voluntarily contribute based on their CO2 footprint. Contributions range from around 200 to 4,000 euros or more to finance tree planting and upkeep. The city manages the process. They cover cost assessments, supplier payments, monitor and ensure accountability and long-term sustainability. And I kind of rushed through, but I hope you have, if anything is unclear, please drop a question or ask us in the panel discussion. Thank you very much. That was my presentation for today.
Thank you, Diana. And yeah, like she said, feel free to drop any questions you might have for her, but also for the both of them. Thank you so much for these insights on finance challenges, and also thank you for highlighting the urgent need to bridge the investment gap and to unlock both public and private funding. Like before, maybe Fen, you have a question for Diana before we dive into the panel discussion.
Maybe a short one. Well, on the level of the case studies that you mentioned, yeah, most of these cases were larger municipalities with probably also an adapted or an administrative structure, management structure that is, let's say, also on a more professional level. I was wondering, but I'm not sure if that's part of your question, because for me, let's say the organizational capacity to also organize all of this is important, especially with smaller municipalities that, at least in Luxembourg, don't have this knowledge, this capacity, and also not this routine to, let's say, also develop projects in a more multi-year approach. Well, I mean, the budget here was not always very high. I don't know. You just mentioned it with one example. So my question, I'm guessing, is what role does the organizational capacity place here because it's not, let's say, a natural way of working for municipalities?
Thanks. It's a very good question. Quite a large role. So municipal capacity is one of the main barriers to implementing these ambitious solutions and mobilizing finance. So definitely there is a dire need to educate and provide the capacity building to smaller municipalities. The good thing is that many of the EU financing mechanisms and grants and laws, they also provide technical assistance to implementation. So, for example, in Athens, I know it's a large city and they are quite well equipped in these kind of projects and European projects and so on. But they have also used the technical assistance provided by CCFLA, Cities Climate Finance Association, the Orbis facility. So cities can definitely tap into these technical facilities available to them, and they need to actively seek opportunities to understand and learn from each other. So I think cross-city collaboration in this question is quite important and a very purposeful capacity building on cities' part. But I also think the national government has a large role to play. So in many cases, we've seen larger projects are coordinated in a national level. This can happen when there is a good working relationship, political and alignment between in terms of political issues. For example, in Hungary, uh, the Budapest is in opposition to the government, so on certain issues from the outside, you can see it's very difficult to collaborate. But when it comes to really implementing or green measures, and you can see between the professional level collaboration between these different levels of governments. But municipalities need to ensure and look and actively seek collaboration with higher levels of government.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Diana. Okay, we have 5 minutes left, but I think we have time for a couple of questions. I have a question for Fan, which is from your experience, what are the most powerful tools or incentives that trigger behavioral shifts in energy consumption or sustainability mobility?
So the word formula is no. I think yeah, I think it's a combination of the different elements, and I think also Diana's presentation somehow showed it that that the different elements need to interact also with each other. When I look at the, let's say, the Luxembourgish context and also what has been worked on during the last years, I think it's really the idea of trying to imagine also the workflow or the customer journey, basically, you know, from the start of the motivation to do something, if it's now a private household, the company, also municipality, through the implementation of the project, and to really understand what are the needs of the different target groups during this whole process. And I think that's something that is, at least in Luxembourgish context, new. Whereas in the past, well, you had let's say a subsidy program, and you said, well, it's there and just use it, and it was clear that the numbers of applications or also the quality of projects was not on the highest level. So it's really this whole process that includes also the collaboration of professional stakeholders, basically. So if you need stakeholders to implement also measures, you need to make sure that they share the same vision of when it comes to quality, but also a way of approaching these projects in a broader sense. And that's something where we can see, at least in Luxembourg, if I take the examples of renovation, for instance, I think the state and also our activities, we did a lot in order to motivate more and more people to go in that direction, to more higher impact projects. But now we see that craftsmen are not ready for it, or are not, the market of craftsmen is not important enough in order to make sure that these projects are being implemented as well. So I think that's really to have more systemic approach and really understand what are the different steps and how can you also on a national or regional or even municipal level make sure that all of these stakeholders are aligned and that the experience is efficient also and helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, cross-sector collaboration, I think, is always the way for these projects. Thank you. I have a question for both of you, and it is, how do you see the EU Climate City Mission influencing the way cities plan and finance the climate action strategies?
I can go ahead. So mission cities, to get a label, they, as part of the Climate City contract, they need to develop an investment plan, which already has them plan how they're going to finance their different climate and resilience measures to be implemented in the city to achieve their targets. But I have not seen all these investment plans, but they're quite high level. And many cities, as part of the, so as far as I know, there was a survey in interested mission cities to be filled out, and many cities gave the feedback that there is a very heavy reliance on EU grants. And they have a lack of knowledge and not enough of experience in innovative sources of finance and innovative financial instruments. So I do believe that should be the direction, and that is my recommendation for EU professionals and policymakers to support cities in both in using these innovative mechanism sources to tap into private finance more, and to use less and less grant available.
Thank you.